Hello, this is part 2. Last time we went through the tools, etc. and the various layout options. Just before I move on and tell you about tweening, which is a method of creating animation in Flash, I'm just going to go through a quick drawing tip. Now, often when I'm drawing a character and I come to shade it, I use blue strokes and literally mark out the area that I want to fill in with a specific colour. So for instance, if I'm doing the darker points where the shadows are created, I can literally just draw each line, and then when I come to actually filling the object, I can choose my colour. Now I've gone for a light beige there, but if I look on my colour mixer, I can slide this down so it's more of a brown shade. And then I've got my major area covered. And then for my darker shades, I can move the slider down. It just gives a bit more depth to your actual character. And then when you come to actually selecting the lines by double clicking them, you can delete them quite easily, and the two or tritone colour pattern just seems to work a lot nicer with your characters. I also spoke in some length about the different types of colour fill that you've got. One that I didn't explain was the bitmap colour fill. And basically this uses an imported image such as a JPEG, a bitmap, a GIF, etc. and it kind of tiles it within the object. So if I draw a rectangle with this texture that I've got imported to my library, my mixer is set on bitmap, and you can see that it's filled the actual shape with that texture and then tiled it when it's actually run out. But it tends to fill only in the actual dimensions of your image, so if I wanted that to be smaller or scale it on the x-axis, I'd have to modify the actual shape by scaling it or transforming it, and then I can use the dropper tool to select that actual size of palette. So you can see it's now filling to the size that I require. I actually use that texture quite a bit in my Tenchu spoof, but you might not have much call to use it. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but there are a couple of tips for you before we move on. Okay. Now, symbols are very important in Flash. When you create a symbol, Flash stores it in the library for future use. Tweening is the easiest way of animating a symbol. This can include making a symbol move from point to point, rotating a symbol, making a symbol bigger or smaller, making a symbol fade or change colour, etc. These are all types of motion tween, which are represented by a blue motion arrow from the starting keyframe to the end keyframe. Now, if you look at your timeline, this is a keyframe, and it's identified by the dot within this rectangle, and that just indicates that there's stuff stored in that keyframe. If I delete it, you can see that it becomes white to indicate that it's unoccupied. And on your timeline, your layers line up here, so if I wanted to add a new layer, I could click this button here, or go to Insert New Layer, and you can see it's created a layer. Now I can drag that above or below to give a basic pecking order on how the layers are arranged. So if you consider a background of a skyline, you might have the sky and the clouds in the bottom layer, and then buildings in your foreground. If you want to delete a layer, you can click the trash can button, and here you've got all the different frames, so your timeline progresses from your start point in frame 1. So if I wanted a movie to be 20 frames long, I could insert a frame on 20. And frames are different from keyframes, because keyframes, they're basically the points at which the animation is going to change, or it defines a key stage in your actual movie. So if the character in frame 1 changed slightly in frame 20, then I could have a keyframe just to show that that's different. You can see that these frames carry on the frame in frame 1, and you can right click to insert new frames or remove frames or copy frames, etc. There are also tweens called shape tweens, but these apply to lines and fills that haven't been converted to a symbol. If the initial shape of the drawing is too complicated, your shape tween will look like vomit dissipating in water and then reforming. Shape tweens should be only used in certain situations. For instance, making a circular ball without outlines spread when it bounces. And I've got an example of this. This is a good example of a shape tween. The object isn't too complicated. It doesn't have a different set of fills and also strokes, so Flash can actually figure out how the ball is changing between these keyframes. If it's too complicated, it won't be able to do the math, as it were. Another good example is if you were to animate a diaphragm or something that uses a line, and in this case it's kind of like a whip. So you can see as the line actually bends between the different keyframes, how Flash works out how the line is changing in between the keyframes. I also produced a simple eye example. Well, I say simple, but it's slightly more complicated than that. What I've basically done is arranged the different parts of my eye. The initial one here, I've just hidden all the layers so you can see this. This is basically my layer that doesn't change at all throughout the animation. So I've called that static because it doesn't change. And then the pupil, as the eye is closing, the pupil's getting bigger to try and enter more light into the retina. So you can see how that gets bigger and then smaller with the motion of the eye. And then I have a bottom lid and a top lid. You can see how I've arranged this top one above the bottom one on my timeline. And as these fills change shape, Flash just calculates that. And then to finish everything off, I did a shape tween between the lines that actually define the lids. For now, if I had all of that within one layer and I tried to do a shape tween, Flash would it wouldn't be able to cope. It'd end up looking pretty bad. Now, just to explain the process of creating that, you've got your layer. You could do this on the main timeline. So I'll insert a blank frame, and then I create a blue circle and delete the stroke because I don't want that. And then we've got a keyframe now in frame 1. So if I insert a keyframe at frame 5 by right clicking on frame 5, and then I'm going to move the circle up and bring it in. So you can see how the balls actually change between frame 1 and frame 5. And then I'll put another one at 9, bring that down, and then I'm just going to scale that out like so. And then at frame 12 I'm going to get it to return to its original position. So if I copy that keyframe and paste it in there, Now you can see I've got the actual main stages here of my ball's motion. So what you do now is drag the frames in between these keyframes. This is my starting one, if you will, and this is where it ends. So I don't want to include the end one because I want that to stay as it is. And then if you go to shape on your properties at the bottom where it says tween, and just click shape, and it's created a distributive blend between each keyframe. So it's figuring out how the ball changes in between these stages. And then